So we're here at Nüart Gallery. My name is Christina, and we are a Santa Fe-based gallery on Canyon Road. And we're with Cecil Touchon, whose show, Songs of the Ineffable, opens tomorrow. And Cecil will actually be here from 5 to 7. If you are in Santa Fe and want to stop by, want to see the show and ask Cecil any questions. But we also wanted to do a Q&A today, and I just want to briefly introduce you so that people will know who you are, and then we will go into more questions.
And this is Christina?
Yes, I'm Christina. You are a man of many talents. You call yourself a painter, a performance artist, collector, draftsman, photographer, curator. Is this true? Yes.
Yeah.
But you're
That
most
and more.
known for your collages, your large-scale collages.
Yeah.
That we have.
Well, of course, these are paintings of collages.
Yes.
But I have a long trail since, I guess, 1983 of making collages, of which there's over 4,000 collages that I've made over the last, since 1983, however long that is.
And your work is in, I think, around 45 corporate and individual collectors around the world.
And a lot of different archives.
Yeah.
Almost all the work that's in all these archives is mostly related to Fluxus projects or mail art things or, group exhibitions that ended up in a big...
Say hi to everyone.
Why, do we see people yet?
No, we can just see the viewers, but I think that people can make comments here. Oh, somebody said hello, Laura.
Oh, hello,
yeah,
Laura.
and we just also want to say if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them and we'll review. But there are many things that, we kind of talked about today, because I think your work has a lot of different layers, as you do as an individual. And I know we got one question earlier, maybe we'll start with that, just about who or what inspired you to create the works in this format, the medium of, collages, and that as sort of an inspiration and a starting point. So that was one question that came through earlier. Maybe we can start there and we'll go into.
Okay. Well, since the late 70s, early 80s, my interest has always been in the formative years of 20th century modernism.
Okay.
Which would begin with like Kandinsky, Picasso, Braque, and all those guys. So that whole period from about 1905 to maybe 1925 is of the ultimate interest to me personally, because that generation of artists were the ones inventing a whole new way to think about artistic production.
Okay.
And so anything before that, for me, is moot. It's like, the Renaissance, and everybody was trying to figure out, even the guys that were going another direction, like the Impressionists, as an example, they were still in conversation with all the way back to the 1500s. However, around 1905-10, pretty much with the beginning of Cubism and the invention of abstraction, the idea of abstraction, like with Kandinsky and plenty of other people at that point, started to open up all these new trails that nobody had ever thought of before, as far as I know.
Yeah.
And so it created this real angst-filled environment for all these young artists. Once they all saw there was something going on, everybody jumped on it, and then that became the way forward, along with architects and musicians, composers like Stravinsky. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of all working in tandem with each other toward a new way to look at the world of art and the production of art and what the ideas of art are. and you know, and that was all driven by the tremendous crisis that photography was creating. Because why do you need another painting of a person when you can get a much more accurate, exacting image of someone with a photograph? So photography was also competing with painting, because they were using, the only way that they knew how to make an image was paintings when photography first got started. So it took photography a long time to start to find its own feet as well. And so, you know, that's all an interesting constant flux that's of great interest to me. So all of these paintings that are based on typography, based on chopped up typography, really got started for me, in the late 1990s when we moved to central Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And I started to see some billboards where the panels had been taken down and rearranged to destroy the advertiser's message, who had stopped paying for their monthly fee on the board. And if they couldn't get the next month, then they just send the guys out to move the boards around so that the entire message is still there, but you can't read it anymore.
Okay,
so that created all these amazing relationships, and the fact that it was in Mexico and it was totally in Spanish that I didn't quite understand yet was sort of a double whammy on my sensibility about language.
Yes.
And realizing that the language could be released in such a way that do you think that's interfering?
I think a little bit. Can we ask?
You could.
Can we ask
go ahead.
Rosalie?
Hey, Rosalia.
To talk about it?
Rose, can you ask those people to keep it down?
So so the person who sent these questions also asked about the 1987 Post-dogmatism group that you were co-founder?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit more about that? And then I think she also wanted to know if the group is still active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's always been a good question.
Yes.
Is the group still active? Well, it's definitely, I can keep it continuously active myself. And I'm constantly doing post-dogmatist projects and research. The International Post-dogmatist Group was created in 1987 in the painting department at the University of Texas at Arlington.
Okay. Wow.
So 3 of us painters at that time, Patrick O'Kelly and Charles Schneider and myself, were taking a contemporary art history course, and at that time, 1987, you know, the vogue was postmodernism, which nobody really knew what the hell is postmodernism. So it's like an innocuous, meaningless term, postmodernism. So, okay, what does that mean? So anyway, our critique and protest of postmodernism was it made a lot more sense to come up with post-dogmatism, which is not necessarily post-dogma, as in, you know, dogmatism in general, but it's actually a little joke that we first came up with dogmatism as a movement, but we realized within 20 minutes, based on the ideas we were thinking about, that none of us could actually be dogmatists. So we invented post-dogmatism. So there's a 20-minute gap between everyone and the post-dogmatists.
Okay.
Until they understand why we had to jump past dogmatism and go straight to post-dogmatism. So post-dogmatism in general is about the dogma of the universe. In other words, that there's a singular entity of which we're all a part.
Yes.
And that's the only actual truth of anything, is the pure reality of the universe itself. Not us as humans, but the universe as a totality. So we as artists then are following that reality, or attempting to, and peeling away our humocentric
Yes.
view as much as we can in order to peer into direct reality that's not filtered by human dogma structures.
Can you repeat that again? Because I think what you said is really important, but I think
Yeah, so
because there are a lot
so-
of concepts, yes,
yeah,
that I find really
so so in that regard, so you could say each one of us has a cocoon of threads
Yes.
of human dogma wrapped all around us, and that when we peer out at the world, we're peering through this set of beliefs that we have. Some of them are natural beliefs that we acquired from childhood, from direct physical experience. That's something closer to what post-dogmatists are trying to get to. And on the other hand, looking at nature from a completely humocentric point of view, which is to say, how does that benefit me as a human? What's the human story that goes with that thing? And then so we're constantly filtering and sheltering ourselves from direct reality, which is being little minute things on a little minute spinning ball around a little tiny bit of light, spinning around in these massive galaxy that's just one little tiny galaxy among who knows how many. We can't even understand it yet. So in the face of that infinite expanse, of which we're just some little tiny thing that is almost completely meaningless, that's what humans are trying to shelter themselves from, that reality.
Yeah.
So if you're an artist and you're thinking about that big reality, then what would be the kind of art you would make that speaks to that unspeakable thing?
Okay. I got it.
Because there's no language that, like the language just drops off, because language is all based on that you and me have shared an experience, and our words can convey that experience back and forth because we both understand the experience. But if we have experiences that are completely unique to ourselves, then there's no way to convey that experience to another person, except maybe with telepathy. But there's no language can't serve most purposes in the grand picture.
Okay, and so this is what the group that you and the two other artists formed in response to this sort of perspective.
To this kind of mystical approach to thinking about art. Okay, so that led to a whole bunch of other ideas, like all the artists from all across history are all part of the International Post-dogmatist group, because the post-dogmatists are the ones that are reaching out beyond their comfort zone to look for something new, interesting, different.
Yes.
And have a more direct experience with reality.
I just want to look at this question. So Emily's asking, in relationship to words and letters, you are disrupting our normal experience of language. And I think that is a really good, yeah.
I probably.
Language.
I don't know what everybody's normal experience of language is, but
I mean, I think language.
yeah,
like,
this is a disruption of that for sure. And what I'm looking for is to keep the remnants of the idea of language, the bits and pieces and parts, and then rearrange them into compositions of things you've never seen before and you will never see again. It's a completely unique thing, because part of the approach is to recognize that the universe is a singular entity, and hence it has no way to do anything except to express itself through complete uniqueness at all times. So everything is unique.
Yes.
As an expression of the unity of all things.
That's beautiful. I think that leads, I mean, we'll go over some of these other points, but I think I'm curious about this, like the migration of aesthetic interest. How do you see, I mean, what you're talking about. When did you create this group?
1987.
Yeah, so 1987. So here we are in 2021.
So by the way, if you're interested, everybody is already a post-dogmatist. They just may or may not realize it. It's an inevitability that you'll have to face reality at some point. So then you're a post-dogmatist.
So we're all mind-blowing.
We're all
Emily says it's
post-dogmatists.
mind-blowing. I believe that, right?
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
all unique expressions
Yeah.
of the universe, right?
And
in every moment.
And it can't express itself in any other way except through uniqueness. Everything is stamped with oneness. Every cell in your body,
Yes.
every infinite, expanse of everything, it's all stamped as one. Like every snowflake,
I know.
by the numberless numbers of them, and everyone's unique even though they only last for a few seconds. I mean, think about that. That's astounding.
It is.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
You can't really take it in as a person. So hence people tend to shelter themselves behind little huts of belief systems. They're a religion or a political party or a job or whatever keeps their mind occupied to make them feel like, they're here. Because we're all part of this just infinite, expansive wave and particle.
Do you think it's too much for some people to shift their perspective
Oh yeah,
to that?
it's almost impossible. Not, you hear about all these different, especially that's the way the whole thing is. And so it's an inevitability that everyone will figure that out at some point. It's inevitable. And that we all live endlessly forever.
Well, I mean, but do you think
And
it's
because of
inevitable
that-
that all people will figure that out? Because I don't.
Well, that's
I mean, at some
that's
point,
the Buddhist program. That
you
everything
mean
eventually
yeah.
will enter into the same singularity that we're all a part of. Eventually it will dawn on each individual, and by that I mean the individual will eventually be infilled with the light of that realization. I mean, you can't get to it by yourself, but it can overwhelm you.
You can't get to it by yourself?
You can't do it by yourself. It's not possible.
Why?
Because our imagination, it's beyond our imaginal capacity to do that. We can attempt to prepare ourselves to experience that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And we can probably, in our life, come close to that through, I think, spiritual experiences or, I think, the art of creation, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, that's probably what gets...
And we're all right in the middle of it already anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's anywhere to go. But it's like, all of a sudden you're walking and then you fall in the ocean, Oh, I didn't even know there was an ocean here. And then you have this big experience, and then, then once you do, then it wakes you up to something that then affects everything else you do after that.
So what
I'll
about,
put it that way.
what is your perspective on the shifts in cultural and artistic focus? Which way is the crowd looking, if you will?
Oh yeah, and you asked me another question that I probably didn't answer.
Oh, I like that question, because I'm curious to
The
hear...
migration of
Yeah.
aesthetic interest. Okay, yeah. So every one of us, artists and so forth, have a sensibility about what we consider an experience of beauty.
Mm-hmm.
But depending on who you are and what your experiences are, you will slowly migrate towards more and more refined sensibility about what that is for you, your sense of beauty. So the reason I bring that up is that every person might find this amazing at one moment, and somebody else thinks it's, what the hell am I even bothering to look at that for? But in the passage of migration from one aesthetic state to another, people will pass through each one of these layers of aesthetic interest because either they're working to understand beauty or they're, but you know, in different.
You think everybody though?
Yeah, and everybody has some kind of. I don't think there's anyone who's absolutely bored with everything. Something interests them, and something within that range of interest is beautiful to them.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter what it is. It might be, if you're a farmer, it
Yeah.
might be the shape of a tractor, or how the boards look on the barn, or how the things the wheat, moves with the wind. Those might be beautiful experiences for someone who's farming, working with the land. So, but even like that, that person can continuously increase their aesthetic enjoyment through higher and higher levels of attention. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So hence, we all ignore 99% of everything around us until it becomes of interest. And so because of that, you can continuously unfold your world and move along a migration of aesthetic interest and beauty and so forth.
How do you think society and culture impacts that for the individual?
Well, for the individual, it's like, we're looking at, right now we're all looking at these screens, and, so we all have our little phones, and they become emotionally very important for us for communication, for understanding the world around us with our little phone. And then, so the shape of the phone with the rounded corners and the screen and so forth, that creates a sense of beauty for every individual eventually. And then most people at this point are completely happy to experience the world through their phone screens, and once people get to that, they get beauty out of that, out of how the screen looks, how the phone feels in their hand. It's like a huge experience. So we're moving away from literature and towards a post-literate world right now, as everybody becomes more and more involved in, like, do I want to read instructions about how to put something together? No, I want to watch a YouTube video and watch somebody do it, and it's 10 times faster for me to get it, and probably for most people. And so the idea of reading and looking at instructions or anything else, that's all at this point starting to just be converted to data. And to understand data, and people are becoming less and less interested in literature. It's a different way to think, and we're moving into another way to think right now in this, in this period, like, let's say maybe since television. We're slowly moving away from reading things, even though there's massive numbers of things to read and writers are continuously writing things still. It's not as prevalent, and people don't feel like they're getting all of their information from reading.
That makes me sad.
Well, it did me too when I started studying up on this subject, some years back. It's like, oh wow, that sounds terrible, but on the other hand, it's just a technology possibly that we're slowly surpassing, that becomes obsolete, like putting horseshoes on a horse, because we don't ride them anymore. I mean, there's still going to be people putting on horseshoes, and there's still going to be people having horses, but it's going to be for a completely different purpose than everyday life, like it was 120 years ago. So we're moving to other things that are more apropos to our technological position that we're in at the moment. It doesn't mean people will stop writing or that people will stop reading things. It just means that it's not going to occupy the same level of
Attention.
ubiquity that it did previously.
We have a question. Okay, can you go back to the origin of the chopped up lettering? You were talking about the releasing of the words from the original meaning. And then you got interrupted by some noisy gallery goers.
Yeah, which I don't know if the noisy gallery people were disturbing the the sound on the video, but it basically was like with the billboards that I mentioned.
Yeah.
I saw in Mexico as we were moving to Mexico in 1998, 1999 when we were fully there. I had some experiences, and I think it really got going from the idea of being confronted with a cultural location like Mexico, where most of the signifiers, what the signs mean or anything else, I didn't really get or understand. And probably would be the same experience of somebody going from the United States to Hong Kong or any other country where they're speaking some other language. And you realize that then you get to see those things on a purely abstract level because all the meaning's been stripped out of it because you can't understand it. So that became kind of the reason why I got interested in this idea of chopping up letters, and then that just eventually became a language for me, so.
And then earlier we
that's my daughter, Brittany
Oh,
Touchon Salazar,
that's
by
Brittany.
the way.
Oh, your daughter?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Hi, Brittany.
And then another question about, earlier we got about the actual creation, the actual process. Can you explain that?
Okay.
I think people are
my
curious.
process of how I make my art.
Yes.
This type of art.
This type of art.
Okay, so a lot of my day, from morning till night, day after day, year after year.
Every day. Okay.
Yeah. Is, I made it, for a lot of years in the 80s, let's say, and early 90s, I decided I was going to stick with one thing and see what happened, and just keep doing it and see where that could go. And when I got to what seemed like the end, to just keep going.
Oh, I like that.
So that's based on a theory by John Cage, American composer, that said, do something until it's boring, or do something, until it's boring, basically, and then keep doing it to see, what you break out of or break into.
Oh, I really like that.
Yeah.
Oh, your mom.
Oh, it's my mom. Hey, Mom, I guess you've been watching me on Facebook. Pretty cool. That's my mommy.
Okay. Process.
Yeah. So, coming back to process, okay. There's Rosalie in the background.
A director.
Trying to keep us rolling here. So, anyway, where was I? I'm getting to be an old guy, so I lose my mind.
What you do every day until it gets boring, and then you see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I did that like during the 80s, early 90s. But then at a certain point, I decided, okay, that's cool, I could do that, and I like that long-term concentration idea, to maintain concentration over a very long period of time. So I did that. But then at a certain point, I decided, okay, I've accomplished that. So now what I'm going to do is when I get up, I'm just going to forget everything that happened yesterday. And when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to do just whatever comes to me. So then
Wait, after you got bored with what you...
Well, I didn't get bored.
Okay.
I just felt like I mastered that.
What?
Of sticking with the same kind of imagery
Okay.
over and over and over
Okay.
and over again. It was a
mastered
different
it.
style than this.
Okay.
But I feel like I mastered that. Might have been the collages was the main thing.
Okay.
Because I've made basically a collage every 3 days
Wow.
for like 35 years.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Every day?
A finished one about every 3 days, on average. So.
Different sizes.
Huh?
Different.
Well, anywhere from 4x4 to
Okay.
well, actually up to 30x40, but there's a rare number of those. It's mostly 9x12, 5x7.
What'd you do with all of them?
They're in, well, a lot of them actually sold.
Okay.
Over the years, but I have many of them in flat files in my house, multiple flat files, and stacked in there, top to bottom. There, you can see a video someplace where it shows one of these flat files in a video that my daughter did called Paper, and that kind of shows the drawers closing and all the pieces that are in just one small cabinet that I have, but there's many others.
So then after you mastered.
Okay, so then I decided, well, I'm going to try to work on being more spontaneous and not really worry about what happens on a daily basis and just make whatever I want, whatever comes to me, and just keep working like that for a long time, and then sort it out later. What's going to be something that goes to the gallery, what's going to be something that goes in the drawer, what's something for potential future research. Just to plot out various potential trails that I could go down when I feel like I'm at the end of a certain trail that I'm ready to stop.
Okay.
Then I can go look back over my work through these catalogs. So I have a catalog for every year since 2010. And
This year?
huh?
Are you going to do one this year?
I'm trying. My publishing.
Wow, those are so beautiful. I'm just looking at
So that's
everything.
so that's a year of work from 2018, and so that has all of my different potential trails I might go down at some point.
That leads you to a painting.
That leads to a painting. So after all these thousands of collages that I've made, eventually this style kind of emerged.
Okay.
Mostly from living in Cuernavaca, and so I was going to see if I had a book that had a certain type that goes with these.
Oh, that I saw that like these.
Sort of. Oh yeah, they're like, there's this type, and we have.
Oh, we can move around if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I don't know how much time they let you do on Facebook, or how bored people are getting. I don't know, but anyway, in these books, I'll go through these books and I'll go, well, what am I going to do next, and where have I not filled in the gaps in the ideas that I'm having, or did I skip over something that I should go back to and kind of double around? Because I don't really think in a straight line. I think kind of in multiple spirals that are going up and down and sideways and around each other.
That's great.
So I can go pick up like this image behind us here. The original image might have been from
I'm gonna just tilt the screen out so they can see it.
2017 or 2016.
It's a really big piece.
Yeah, this is like 6 feet tall, 8 feet wide. And this actual image was extracted from a small work and then only a portion of that work. Like from some of these pieces that I make, I could make 100 paintings of different parts of the original collage. And then with this style specifically, I have some pieces that are as big as 5 by 10 feet, all made with tiny bits of collage material that I could go through and isolate out 500 paintings just from that.
Wow.
It's like a codex or something. So anyway, my whole process is make the, and I think over a very long time.
Yes.
And I think of all the time as the same time. I don't think of it as this is from here, this is from there, because I try to work in a way that seems to me at least timeless, that anything can be brought from the back, from the front, from the future, from the past, and pulled in, for a direction. And so, like I said, this image was a little piece of a collage that I made, 4 or 5 years ago. I'm just now getting to it. But at this large scale, those particular type of collages have become very interesting to me because at this scale, it's possible to look at a little tiny element within this much larger composition and then use that as a basis for this kind of a composition. So I'm excited about these new pieces because I actually already have made a limitless number of studies for this type of a painting.
Limitless.
So, yeah, because none of my paintings are ever spontaneous. I already know what the composition's going to be before I start.
Oh, really?
And then I choose a color scheme that I'm going to use, and then I choose a variety of different procedures I'm going to go by to end up with the image. But the actual composition itself is predetermined. Okay. So I'm not designing any of these paintings on the spot. They're all a basic composition, like I mentioned before on a different day, that my collages are the scores and my paintings are the performances of those scores. So it's like you could play a piece of Mozart 1,000 times all over the world for 200 years. And in the same way, most of my collages for me can be revisited endlessly to come up with new paintings all the time. Sometimes the exact same image, but I might decide, I like this image, but now what would it look like if it was 3 times larger? Or what would it look like if it had a different kind of surface treatment? Or if I took a little bit different approach with the light, etc., or change the color scheme, or, so any one of my collages could become over and over again another painting.
Yeah.
Right. Or what would it be like if it was stretched sideways or pulled more vertically? Like this one is more pulled to the sides to get wider pieces of form in the middle. And I think it came out fantastically, personally. But then that's me. I'm the artist.
So Emily has another question about musical connections, which I think you just touched on one in terms of the scores and composition, but also language. I mean, I know you listen to a particular type of music when you're creating. Is that correct?
What was the question?
You listen to a particular type of music.
Oh, yes.
That is very intense.
Okay. It's very intense.
I tried to work
Okay,
it.
Emily, you can go on YouTube when we're finished here and look up minimalist
jazz.
No, minimalist music playlist of Cecil Touchon. Use that phrase, and then you'll pull up a playlist that I made this week that's going to be used as background music for this show tomorrow night when we have the opening. We might have to turn it down kind of low because, as Christina says, it gets kind of intense because it's all minimalist composers like, Philip Glass, and if you're a percussionist, you probably like Steve Reich a lot. He does a lot of percussive pieces, really wonderful. And John Adams, love John Adams. Terry Riley, all those guys. I listened to those guys all the way back since the 70s. And, when I could hardly afford to buy a record at the time. But a lot of that got started with my interest in John Cage's pieces for prepared piano, which I thought was just mind-blowingly cool idea. And so a lot of this work I relate it to the minimalist composers, to certain pieces that I listen to over and over many times. And I see these, especially this type of painting here, as having some of the same repetitious elements that are constantly shifting and changing and moving. So that's another connection. Then, I don't know if I've got any in these books, but I mean, I'm always thinking about musicality when I'm making artwork for the most part. I was going to see if there happened to be a specifically musical painting in here. So far, I'm not seeing one in this book. But over the, okay, here we go. Here's some drawings of different musical thoughts. You know, where it's a little more symphonic, exploring the idea of multiple different forms linear forms overlapping each other and creating new forms. And so that's some experimentation in the idea of a kind of transparency, of having forms working together in a transparent way to create a sense of orchestration. And that's extremely interesting to me. But the problem for me is that is so contemplative, and time is just, I mean, I have one music painting called, I call it Symphonic Variations. And I started it in 1996, and I just finished it like 2 years ago. And I could keep working on it.
Really?
Yeah. So that's a book. That's a painting that I worked on for like over 20 years, off and on. And I get it so far along, and I go, well, I got to think about that. And then I'd look at it for 2 or 3 years, and then work on it a little bit more. And what if I tried this idea? What if I did this? What if I did that?
That's not frustrating to you?
No,
That would be
it's just
frustrating.
interesting.
Oh, really? To keep something.
Yeah, but since I'm not worried about selling it or putting it into production,
Yeah.
that's the thing that I have to concern myself with as a professional artist, is the production time that it takes to produce something and the predictability of the image. That's very important if you're going to produce work on a production basis. If you're doing something that you constantly have to contemplate everything you do and put it on and try it out, going, it doesn't quite work, and then paint something out and repaint it and keep doing that over and over again for years and years while you're working out the total idea. But in the end, the idea is so complex that you can't really, it's not repetitious like these are. These are based more on chance and chopping things up and trying things out. I mean, it still took weeks to make this painting, but
Weeks seem short.
yeah, it does seem short by comparison to decades.
Yes.
But even like that, I mean,
Impressive.
because this other painting, if I was going to spend 15 years on it, I'd have to sell it for $10 million to get my work, to pay for the value of the time spent. So, I mean, maybe I could do that. I don't know. But,
can sell it.
I'd have to be, like in a Gagosian type gallery to pull that off. But then you still have to be able to make 10 of them. And you can't do that in a lifetime if you spend 15 years on one. But anyway, that specific painting is more about just developing the idea, because it's very complex and it's never really been done before like I'm doing it, that I know of. And, because I also look a lot at visual scores and experimental scores that composers are doing to experiment with, you know, how to do a visual version instead of written language, you know, like music sheets. And there's a lot of fascinating things people have come up with over the years for that.
Well,
Where are we at? Anywhere?
45 minutes.
Is that 45 minutes?
Yeah, so anything else that you want to share about the work that we have here for this show?
Yeah, Emily mentioned one that looks like bass clefs. Okay.
Is it? Is there?
No.
Okay.
It looks like it to her.
No.
But think about it. Musicians and people like that created things visually that would look as close to something musical as they could dream up. And so if I'm looking for something musical that I'm doing with you know, gesture and so forth, it's going to have a tendency to have spirals and you know, arabesques, because that's the flow, you know. And so those kind of elements are always going to end up, you know, in little bits of things, and those are going to end up, you know, being isolated down into a musical form for the language of music, for writing music. And the same with the instruments. You know, they're going to emulate the feeling of these curves and proportions that remind people of music. It's not that a lot of things have to look exactly that way, but they just naturally do because of the musicality that people have in their minds.
Okay.
That's
That
what I
makes
think.
sense.
That's my theory. Well, I don't know. That's what you feel like. Did we get to the bottom
so.
of the list?
I think we've been on for 47 minutes. That's a while. I think unless you wanted to talk about, we didn't really talk that much about science. I mean, we talked about universe, chance, aesthetics, and science. If you wanted to.
The science element that, you know, because I gave Christina like a group of potential talking points, and then, you know, so we've been looking kind of through those, and the idea of science, how I'm using it in my work is the idea of experimentation and following experimental models to come up with systems for dealing with randomness and not chaos, but randomness and chance, of how to funnel chance events and randomness into my work by setting limits that would cause those chance events to end up in a range of solutions that I want to look at.
Okay.